The 70s, my goodness, today has become a thing. You know, everybody wants to be part of those events around the 70s, whereas when we lived those events, basically nobody paid any attention. The 70s were a big era for me personally, because I had been working in my studio, I had been working in my theater. I stopped performing publicly with my company, Instant Theater, in the mid-60s, actually in 66 because my knees went bad. And I was doing a lot of sculpture, and it was very interesting because at that period I was completely male identified, and I had a lot of trouble identifying myself as a woman, even though I was a very feminine person, because I didn't consider that you can be a woman and an artist, as most of us couldn't consider that. And it was for many, many years a real fight in my brain and in my being and in my approach to the arts and my approach to my life to accept the fact that I was both a woman and an artist. But I couldn't. And I was making all kinds of terrible mistakes in my relationships because I was so muddled in my understanding of my gender. So that went on for years. And I don't know how it happened, but the person that I knew from New York was Mimi Shapiro. And so when I saw Mimi again, it was like, you know, oh, she's Paul's wife, not she is this wonderful artist. But we started to talk, and we got interested, and she said, I'm coming to teach with Judy Chicago at Cal Arts, and we have a workshop going, a feminist workshop going, and I have a little group of women who gets together every week, and we sit down in a circle, you know, and talk. And at that period, you know, everybody was into consciousness raising and talking about themselves, you know, and I figured, well, this is what they're doing. I didn't think that all these women were sitting around talking about art or being artists, okay? So she invited me to come to the circle, and everybody was, you know, saying things, and I figured this is like an audition because I would like to be part of such a group, and I want to be accepted. So I made it into a performance, basically. And people were like that, you know, and of course I was very happy about making an impression. And so I was accepted in this circle, which was, of course, the circle that started not only the conference in Cal Arts, but also Women's Space and everything else at that period. That was 71, I believe. So I got to know all these women that I didn't know before, but I hadn't seen their work yet, and I was still really feeling different from them in a way. I was not a girl, you know, somehow. Then came the Cal Arts Conference. Well, that was like, you know, because for 3 days we sat in this big auditorium and there were no lights on, and there was just slide after slide after slide of women's art. Whoa! This was such a sudden realization for me. This is good art, and it's done by women. Wow, you know? And it completely made me readjust my brain. And from then on, I read all the feminist literature, all the books that were coming out, pouring out, you know, And of course, I went to consciousness raising, and I was learning the vocabulary, and I was showing my work, and there was interest in my work as an artist and not a woman, you know. So it was a real realization, a big, you know, change in my whole lifestyle and my thinking and everything else. So I was, of course, a part of the protesters at LACMA and so on. And I got to know Judy. Judy was, what a character. I divorced in '79, but it wasn't for anything but the fact that I wanted to be an artist. And I had been a housewife. The group that I was in, that little consciousness raising art group, decided that we needed to have a gallery for women. They looked and found this place on Venice Boulevard, which had been a laundromat and which was now empty and kind of decrepit. And we were able to get it, and the women began to transform it into a gallery. But we decided to call it Woman Space instead of House. And we began to really get into the business of showing the work. There was, of course, the front galleries that were for individual or group shows. And then there was a little space for, how do they call it? It was a wall where people would write their name, and one after another they would have a week to show her whether they were chosen in the gallery part or not, you know. So there was room for women who had not reached a certain professional level, and there was room for the professional ones. In 1975, what happened was that I had begun to look at performance, and I hadn't been really performing since '66, because as I said, my knees went bad. So I was getting a little antsy again, because in reality I'm a more dedicated performer than I am an actual sculptor, even though I enjoyed it a lot. So I got a phone call from those two gay boys who had a gallery called the Orlando Gallery in the Valley. And they had come to see my instant theater in the '60s. And they said, "We want you to come and do a performance here." And at the time, I had seen some performances. Aside from Woman House, I had seen Barbara's work. And I realized that it was all about me, me, me. Well, I can do that. So I did my first performance in the Valley at the Orlando Gallery, and it was all about my bad knees. And so since then, I was thinking of doing more performances, and I did several in different venues. One was Mount St. Mary's, and then I had one in a space that doesn't exist anymore on Wilshire in Westwood, and I did the piece at Lace. And while I was living there, that horrible man who I completely always block his name.
Kim Jones.
Kim Jones, thank you. See, I need her all the time. Kim Jones did a performance, and he had bought a rat. And he did the performance with the rat, which was supposed to just walk with him, you know, with all his sticks and garbage on his body on Hollywood Boulevard. And that poor rat was scared shitless and didn't want to stay on his shoulder and was starting to jump off. So he put a little leash on him and nearly killed him because he put it around his neck, and rats and mice don't have necks, so it really hurt him. So I come to see the show at Lace, and I see this rat in a cage in the middle of the room, which was about the remnants of the performances from that, bunch of pieces. And I said, who's taking care of this rat? There was no food, there was no water, nobody. So I said, I'm adopting him. And that was how I got Tatty. So I did one piece with Tatty at Lace. And it was the only piece I ever did where I was naked for 2 minutes. So that's a big me, right? And then little by little, my work began to change because I was changing so much. And it was no longer about me, although I used some of my personal in order to reach an audience that would identify with some of my issues and then go from there to global issues. So that was basically my development, and it remained that way until I stopped performing in 2000. And then I was just teaching and creating my company. But, to come to the end of my story, so to speak, I wonder sometimes where I would have been without the Women's Building and without Women's Space and without the whole feminist movement. And all of this period and all of this work and all of this astonishing effort put into this goal created so much change in the lives of so many, because girls were coming from all over to work at the Women's Building. It became the place where you earned your ribbons. And it was really a very important place where women could become history and live in history. There were 2 events in my life that changed the course of my destiny. The first one was reading Antonin Artaud, Le Théâtre et son double, which helped me understand what my art was going to be, because I didn't know. I was a big muddle. I loved all the arts and didn't know how to choose one of them to make my category specific, because that's what you were supposed to do in those days. But reading him, I understood that I can take all the arts, put them together in a theatrical connotation, and therefore not make any sacrifices of giving up any of them. So that was the first, and then the second one was the feminist movement, and understanding that I can be a woman and an artist. So that shaped me completely, and I'm eternally grateful, because otherwise I would have become a big neurotic, because I was going straight for that. I was really a very sad, upset person, because it was an issue that I just couldn't resolve. I am, let's face it, a woman. And I was not a lesbian, although I tried, but it didn't work out. So, what can I say? That was my life.